Before winter break, Fox Ridge Middle School students studied the United States Space Force. Students submitted questions, and today, members of this newest branch of the military are here with Fox Ridge to answer student questions.
Fox Ridge Middle School. This is Mrs. Haganis Gonzalez. I'm a 7th grade social studies teacher, if you're not familiar with me, but today we have such an amazing opportunity. We have members of Space Force with us who are going to be introducing themselves, telling us a little bit about Space Force, and answering your questions that you wrote during RISE. So to get us started, okay, just to let you know who our presenters are, who are members, Space Force members that are joining us today, we have Colonel Pepper, we have Lieutenant McCrae, Lieutenant Jordan, Lieutenant Hart, and Senior Airman Matthews joining us. So I'm gonna let them introduce themselves and then we'll get to our Q&A part of our session today.
Good morning, everyone. Colonel Devin Pepper here. I am the commander of Buckley Garrison. So Buckley Air Force Base right here in Aurora. So first thing I will say is I have not transferred into the Space Force yet. So unfortunately for me, I have to wait a couple more weeks for things to happen, and then hopefully I'll be able to transition into the Air Force. You can't see my name tape here, but it still says U.S. Air Force, unlike Lieutenant Jordan, Lieutenant Hart, who they have already transferred into the Space Force. But certainly I am looking forward to being a Space Force member in the next few weeks here. All right, with that being said, I am the commander of the installation here. So on this installation, we fly satellites. We fly a lot of them. And the satellites we fly defend the United States and defend our nation. And certainly the crews that operate these satellites are some of the best in the world. We do a lot more. There's a lot more activity going on here on the installation, but certainly that is probably the most important thing that we do here. So again, I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Jordan, Lieutenant Hart, and Lieutenant McCrae to talk through, and Senior Airman Matthews to talk through what they do. But certainly it is a fantastic that this base will eventually be redesignated a Space Force base. So right now it's an Air Force base, but we're hoping pretty soon that we'll be able to redesignate this base as Buckley Space Force Base. So with that being said, here to take your questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Jordan.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Jordan. I also work at Buckley Air Force Base, hopefully soon to be Space Force Base. I operate the missile warning satellites that Colonel Pepper was just talking about. I've been in the military for a little over 3 years at this point. I've been in the Space Force since September when I had the first possible opportunity to transfer, and here I am. I studied physics for my undergrad degree because I told myself that if I studied physics, the Air Force had no choice but to let me do space operations. I don't know if it worked, but here I am, and this is what I wanted to do. So when I had the opportunity to switch, of course I took it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lieutenant Sydney Hart, and like Lieutenant Jordan said, both of us work on Buckley Garrison, and we work with the Missile Warning Enterprise that is known as SBIRS. So all of those cool satellites that Colonel Pepper was talking about work hard all day, every day, just like the people of Buckley, to bring you guys the best that space has to offer and to keep America and the rest of the world safe using space technology, which I think is amazing. I've been in the military for just about 3 years now, and just like LT Jordan, I crossed over to the Space Force the first opportunity that I had. I was so thrilled and excited about the opportunities that are going to present themselves in like this amazing new historical force, and you guys had some phenomenal questions that I'm so excited to answer, and I can tell there's a lot of really good minds watching this, and I'm really excited to answer your question.
My name is First Lieutenant Heather McCrae. I am working actually for Colonel Pepper right now in the Commander's Action Group, but I'm actually a civil engineering officer by trade. So I got my degree in civil and environmental engineering, and I love the STEM career field. So I'm excited to answer some of your questions about that. And thank you for having me here today.
Matthews. I'm public affairs, and I joined back in 2016, and what public affairs necessarily does is our space operators that you just met, they do tons of awesome stuff, and the whole world is wanting to know what Space Force is and what Space Force does, and my job is to put out that information.
Have our first student, Kathleen. She has a question to ask all of you. So Kathleen, you can unmute yourself. and ask your question. You could say what grade you're in too, dear. Thank you.
I'm Kathleen, and I'm in 7th grade, and I was wondering, why did you decide to do Space Force, and how did you get in?
Cool. I guess I'll take this one, just because I was slightly mentioning it in my intro. So Space Force, it started up last year on the 20th, so it's almost the Space Force's birthday. Let's go. And as I mentioned before, I went to school because I wanted to commission as an officer and do space operations. So I went to the University of Massachusetts Amherst because I'm originally from the East Coast. Go Patriots! Everyone's groaning. And I went to University of Massachusetts Amherst and studied physics because I knew STEM degrees were looked highly for going into certain career fields. So I went through ROTC Reserve Officer Training Corps at Detachment 370 to commission into the Air Force after I graduated. And when I did, I graduated and I was lucky enough to be able to do space operations, which brought me out here to Buckley in Colorado. With the Space Force standing up last year, we were all given the option on the beginning of September, so the 1st of September, we were given the option to switch over from the Air Force into the Space Force. And because I still love what I do and I wanted to stay here doing it, I decided that was absolutely my choice. And that's what I decided to do. And I'm sure Sydney Hart can also say the same thing. If you guys have anything else to add.
So here's what I'll tell you, but certainly we have just now, earlier this year, we have brought in direct commission officers from the Air Force Academy. They graduated from the Air Force Academy and commissioned straight into the Space Force. And just last week, we actually had an opportunity to bring in our first enlisted folks that graduated from basic training down in San Antonio, and they came directly into the Space Force. So certainly as we bring in other officers and other enlisted folks, they'll have opportunities now to come straight into the Space Force and not have to do the transfer from the Air Force into the Space Force. So certainly there's opportunities for everyone who join any ROTC detachment in college and also who go to the Air Force Academy to come straight into the Air Force. Great question.
Kathleen, I've got something to add, Ms. Agnes, if we've got time. So one thing that's kind of different about my education background from some of the other members who are sitting on the panel today is I actually didn't study something that's considered STEM. I have a bachelor's of science, which I think will likely be a requirement to be in the Space Force, at least in the foreseeable future. But one thing I would just encourage you to think about, and one thing that I thought about for a long time before I joined the Space Force, before I decided for sure this is what I want to do, is the Space Force needs different skill sets, right? Some people are very, very technically, mathematically, or scientifically just brilliant, right? And that's, Lieutenant McCrae, Colonel Pepper, and Lieutenant Jordan up here. My skill set is a little bit different, and my background is a little bit different. And so when I was deciding whether I wanted to go into the Space Force, I thought, well, I'm so different from a lot of these people who are transferring over. Maybe I'm not as smart, or maybe I'm not as scientific as a lot of the other people who are crossing over. And what I've come to find is that's just simply not true. You all have these amazing gifts and talents and skills that you're going to have to learn how to use and how you want to use them. And so part of the reason we've got so much diversity on the panel today and in the Space Force as a whole is because pretty much any type of intelligence that you can sharpen and bring and make yourself the best person that you can be is going to be useful to the Space Force. So that's how you get in, is you find your skills, you sharpen them, and you decide that you want to use them for the greater good. And that's the decision that everyone you're talking to today here made.
Awesome. That's some great advice. Thank you so much for answering that question. Our next question is going to come from Anshfir. So Anshfir, do you want to turn your camera on, bud, and introduce yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, my name is Anshfir Bali, and I am in 7th grade. And my question is the Space Force's duty to protect us from space, and how would you do it? So
here I'll take a stab at that one. I will tell you. So let me first explain Space Force. Space Force is the 6th service on par with the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. Now we have Space Force. So, and the commander or the chief of space operations is General Raymond, and he has a lot of responsibility. He has to protect and defend all of space. And as you know, space is pretty vast. So here's what I'll tell you. We have to protect it either from on orbit, from threats, countries that may want to threaten our satellites on orbit, and we have to be able to protect from the ground as well. So certainly he has a huge responsibility when it comes to ensuring and not just protecting and defending the military interests in space, but also the U.S. interests in space to include our commercial partners. So certainly he has a lot of responsibility, and protecting space is a very daunting challenge. And that's the reason why Space Force came out of the Air Force, because we had to be able to focus on that and devote a lot of attention to protecting and defending the space domain. And the space domain is on par and similar to land, air, sea. So now we have space that we have to defend as well. And there's a lot of space up there. So, all right. So great question. And that's why Space Force is here, to be able to make sure that we can maintain and protect our U.S. interests in space.
Thank you so much. Our next question is going to come from Jasmine, and Jasmine's videos having some technical difficulties, so she'll just be on audio for us. So Jasmine, you are up, my dear.
Okay, so my question is, hi, I'm Jasmine. But my question is, why did it take so long for the Space Force to be branded as an independent part of the military branch of the military?
Okay, so I don't want to answer all the questions, but certainly as the old guy in the room here, I guess I'll probably start. And that is a fantastic question. I mean, what grade are you in?
7.
The 7th grade?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty astute question for a 7th grader. Okay, it did take, so here's what I'll say is we have been looking at this for over 20 years. And certainly as the Air Force had to grow out of the Army, certainly the Space Force had to grow out of the Air Force. But certainly we have been looking at this for a long time, for about 20 years now, and ever since I was a young captain. So in order to create a service takes a lot of effort to do that. And unfortunately, we had a lot of things like fighting wars that we had to focus on. So it took us quite a bit of time till we can get the Congress and the White House to really focus on devoting getting the support, because the only reason why we stood up a Space Force is through the act of Congress. So it just took a while to get everyone's attention that this is the right time to do it. Certainly, we've been looking at it for the past 20 years. It just took about a year ago, some dedicated focus to really make this happen. But that's a fantastic question.
Awesome. Thank you, Jasmine. Our next question comes from Carter. So Carter, would you turn your camera on and introduce yourself and ask your question?
Hi, I'm Carter. I'm in 7th grade. My question is, where do you think Space Force will be in a decade or 2?
Ooh, that's a really, really good question. I'd say it's really anyone's guess. However, a few things I can see now, just being a brand new officer in Space Force, is that there's a lot of changes we can make, a lot of things we can do that can separate us from the Air Force. We can make changes to the way we go about doing our operations. We can make changes to the way we help folks. And it's not just, hey, we'll have new satellites in the next 10 years, but our whole mindset as we kind of get into the idea of how do we protect space? How do we prevent adversaries from taking away space capabilities for the world, essentially? And I think as we grow and become pointed towards that effort, I think we'll have a little more idea of where we're going with that, and a little more, that's what I'm looking for here. We'll just have a better vision, and we'll know where we're going. And we'll start to make our own thing as opposed to the Air Force or the Army or the Marines, et cetera.
Yeah, well said, Jordan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carter. Chloe, you have our next question. Please turn on your camera and introduce yourself.
I'm Chloe. I'm a 7th grader, and my question was, how has the whole pandemic and remote working situation affected the works in the Space Force?
Hi, Chloe. I can answer that question for you. Good question. It's been pretty difficult this year. We're not going to lie. We've never really had to deal with this back until the 1918 pandemic, you know. So we have a lot of other, not just the Space Warriors working for the Space Force on Buckley Air Force Base. We have a lot of amazing medical officers and enlisted members who have worked so hard this year trying to get rapid testing done and, you know, trying to sort of manage the effects on the workforce and everything. So they have done some amazing work this year. We've also had some amazing like communications officers and enlisted members helping us get telework under control, because that was a whole initiative too, trying to get everyone set up for telework. But in terms of our Space Warriors, a lot of, unfortunately, what they do has to be here on base in our restricted area. So unfortunately, they haven't really been able to telework too much, but they've done some amazing things working with shifts and cleaning procedures, and everyone's wearing masks here on base. So it's been a challenge. I'm sure maybe if they want to jump in and add, but we have some amazing members working here on our base to make sure that we are all COVID safe, and we're so grateful for them. Good question.
And then Aditya has our last student ask question. So Aditya, would you like to turn on your camera and introduce yourself?
So hi, I'm Aditya Fernandez. I'm a 7th grader at Fox Ridge Middle School. So my question was, if extraterrestrial life came into our solar system and colonized another planet besides Earth, what would be the Space Force's response?
I like this one. That's a great question, Aditya. And one thing that I think is really important when you're answering this question is to kind of look at, how does the Space Force approach things differently maybe than other branches have approached potential conflict in the past? A phrase that this whole circumstance brings to my mind is, if you act like a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And I think that's something that's awesome about the Space Force, because I think the Space Force would try to make contact. They would try to reach out and they would try to communicate to the best of their ability with whatever intelligent or extraterrestrial life was colonizing another planet, because that says two things. One, they're not threatening because they have the technology to colonize a planet and they chose not to do it on the planet that was inhabited, right? And then two, they're more advanced than we are. We haven't been able to colonize a planet yet. And so I think the Space Force and the members in leadership would identify that we have a tremendous amount to learn if they're willing to teach us. And I think it would be approached the way a lot of relationships here on Earth with other intelligent beings that, you know, lead other intelligent countries is approached. And sometimes we have philosophies, beliefs, and values that we share and we can come to agreement on and we can become allies. And then sometimes that's not the case, unfortunately, and it creates tension, it creates conflict. And I think the Space Force and hopefully whoever was in global leadership at the time would approach that with an open mind and a mind that said, you know, we have a lot to learn from this species, and working in harmony with them is probably the most advantageous course of action. So I really think that's what the Space Force would do, is what the Space Force has always done, and that's try to learn and try to get better.
Can I add on to that question? Would that information be like classified to the general public?
I believe that unless it was a direct threat to the general public at large, the information would probably be kept pretty close at home, just because I think things like that are so complicated, right? That if a million voices are speaking their opinion on something, and, you know, potentially feeling fear or anxiety about what that relationship might look like, it could cause some chaos in our country and in other countries. And realistically, that doesn't create a safe environment for everyone. And so I think the people who needed to be the most informed about it in the beginning would be. But I don't believe that if we were making extensive contact with another form of intelligent life, we would keep that information. I mean, that would be historical and literally change the course of the universe, right? So I definitely think when it was safe to talk to people about some of those national security changes, you would be totally informed, and you know, it would just be, it's a hard thing to think about, isn't it? It's a hard thing to kind of wrap your mind around. But the objective of keeping information secret is right next to the objective of keeping the American people safe. So I think if there was an interest in that, that's how they would handle it. But maybe we'll know in the next few years.
I think a little bit of additional thoughts on that is that it would definitely be a truly global effort to communicate. I don't think it would be just one country saying, we're going to go talk to these. I think it'd really be everybody, because at the end of the day, if they were hostile and tried to colonize us next, like that would be a global, like we would have to unite to work against that. So I think it would be a truly global effort. And then similar to how when world leaders talk nowadays, like a lot of what they speak behind closed doors is classified to just them. I feel like a lot of that at the beginning, what we discussed with these aliens, we might not be telling everybody, but they might know that, hey, we're trying to work things out. Things are going okay, maybe not okay. At least my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Thank you, Aditya. We appreciate that question. So we have a few other questions from 6th, 7th, and 8th graders at Fox Ridge that I have for you that they wrote ahead of time. So we have a question from a 6th grader, Amani N, in Ms. Grinnemeyer's RISE class. Has a question about what type of degree and skills would you have or need to join the U.S. Space Force, or even experience. I know a lot of you had briefly talked about what you had maybe studied in college, but what sorts of experiences do you even need to have within the military in order to qualify?
Yeah, so I would just, I'm going to tag on to what Lieutenant Jordan, Lieutenant Hart mentioned about having STEM degrees. So certainly having a STEM degree is important. A degree in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, all of those are very helpful because we are a digital service, right? So we are the first service to identify itself as a digital service. So certainly, having skills, very highly technical skills is important. But certainly we need folks who are leaders, who have leadership skills, kind of what Lieutenant Hart was talking about. Sometimes it doesn't matter what your degree may be in. We need strong leaders. We need folks of character. We talk about service before self, integrity. We need young leaders and young people who exhibit excellence in everything they do. So certainly being the best, being of high character, those are the things that we're looking for in addition to STEM degrees. And STEM degrees are great, but we need really strong leaders and people of high moral character in the Space Force. So I'll just so continue to work hard, do hard, be kind to each other, and certainly help out your fellow neighbors and be a good citizen. That's what we're looking for folks in the Space Force.
Awesome. And then just to build on that, Colonel Pepper, how has your journey been to get here through the military?
So that's a 31, almost a 32-year story that I could tell. So I won't bore the class with the school with kind of my story, but it's been an interesting one. So I started off, I came into service in 1989. I'll just say it, 1989, and I have been stationed in different places from Little Rock, Arkansas, to working with NATO in Holland and Germany, stationed in Korea, and deployed to a combat zone, and stationed in England. And so my journey has been long and vast and very varied. But certainly one thing that I will tell you is it has been a journey and an enjoyable experience for me and my family. So I think that's one thing you have to have a sense of adventure. You have to have a sense of things are going to change and things are going to grow. And certainly if you would have asked, Captain Pepper years ago, if we would have a separate Space Force, I probably would have said, no, I don't think we will. But if you see how fast technology changes and how fast our social and global dynamic changes, things are happening rapidly. And if you have a spirit of adventure and you want to join something that really is kind of on the cutting edge, then certainly that's kind of been my journey, is always being willing to do something different and do something new. And to be part of this next step is absolutely fantastic for me and my family. So if you have a spirit of adventure, we'll certainly take you into Space Force.
We have another question from Bridget in 8th grade. And her question was, what challenges were there in creating the Space Force? You had kind of talked about it a little earlier too.
Yeah, I would. So here's what I will tell you. The challenge always is resources, money, and people. Of course, when we stood up Space Force, we knew we could not do everything, and this is why having Lieutenant McCrae here on the panel and C. Airman Matthews is so important, because they're still Air Force members. They are still in the Air Force working for the Space Force. And this is where, when we stood up the Space Force, we knew we were not going to be able to duplicate everything that needed to be, that the Air Force has, right? To be able to run installations and have a medical corps and have security forces to defend the installations. So Space Force said, we're gonna stand up to do space operations only, and we're gonna rely upon the Air Force to do those things for us. So certainly resources was a big challenge, and making sure that there was no money and manpower to duplicate everything, to stand up a totally independent service that does everything that the Air Force does. So we rely upon the Air Force quite significantly to do a lot of those things for us, so the space operators can focus on their mission. So that took some time to really come down to put together. And the first thing we do, and then this is an iterative process. So the first step was, let's bring in everyone from the Air Force, all the space operators and intelligence and some cyber folks into the Space Force. But we haven't really focused on what the other services like the Navy and the Army, and brought those folks and members into the Space Force. So we first said, well, let's go ahead and bring the Air Force members over into the Space Force. And now, hopefully next year, we'll be able to start bringing in the Navy and the Army component and members into the Space Force. So it's going to take a while. It's an iterative process, but certainly there's a path forward to get to where we need to be. But certainly the first step was really just trying to make sure that we stay lean and lethal and focus on protecting and defending space, and let the Air Force take care of running the installations.
I keep talking with and I'm muted. Technical difficulties. Awesome. So with that, then we have Harper K from 8th grade too, who's wondering, with that kind of joining of Air Force and Space Force and, those requirements to get into Space Force, what type of careers are out there for students who are interested in joining the Space Force? What types of different roles could they play?
McCrae?
I'll let Lieutenant Hart talk about that. Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking about it when you were speaking, Colonel Pepper, is there's such a wide range and such a tremendous number of opportunities for people who want to serve in the Space Force, and it's only going to continue to grow. So right now, the core AFSC, which stands for Air Force Specialty Code, that people are serving under, is either 13 Sierra or 1 Charlie 6. And since there's so many of them, I can't list off every single job that every single Space Force member in the blue name tapes is doing today, but they range from everything from being a missile warning mission operator. So, looking at IR data and determining if it's a missile, and then if it is, sending out that warning globally. And then 12 feet away, I work with Lieutenant Jordan, who types something into a computer, I have no idea what, and it makes the scanners do certain things all the way up in space. And we're doing what the Air Force or the Space Force kind of considers as the same job, because we work on the same weapon system, yet our jobs are so different. So what that stands to say is that there are dozens and dozens of different jobs that space operators do on even individual little bases. And so you can do anything from commanding satellites to using ground-based radars to do tracking, telemetry, and control. Or there are intelligence analysts who we have now absorbed into the Space Force that minute by minute by minute get amazing top secret information that helps Space Force members do their job. So there's a tremendous number of jobs and careers, and you can kind of look into it if you look up. One thing that honestly, when my family was asking me the same questions, I said, look up on Wikipedia, Space Force installations or Space Force garrisons. And you can go and you can click on the hundreds of different squadrons that are responsible for the variant different things. But the breadth is wide. And what I wanted to comment on Colonel Pepper's previous statement is, right now, we don't have Space Force medical technicians, right? But that doesn't mean we don't have medical technicians that work for the Space Force and that support and uplift the needs of Space Force members. And so whatever your interest is, if you want to be a graphic designer and go into public affairs, it's highly probable you could be designing some Space Force public affairs material. If you want to be a medical technician, or if you want to be a military police officer, all of those jobs exist in a capacity where they support the space operations mission, which is incredible. It's incredible. But if you want to be a little bit more hands-on and you want to understand the actual nitty-gritty of what the Space Force does, just know that it's broad, it's big, and the information varies from place to place and from mission to mission set. But it is some cool stuff for sure, for sure.
I also want to add one little piece to that, just a tiny little thing. Colonel Pepper was talking about how the Air Force supports us being here, but there's also cases where we support the Air Force. We have space warfighters downrange, deployed overseas, who their job is to be the space folks telling the Air Force, hey, like, this is how we can help you guys. So we're definitely ingrained into the total force with everybody else. So there's a lot of things we can do, a lot of roles we can fill. I just wanted to add that piece too, because it's not just us being supported, we're also supporting.
It's true.
Yeah, I have some stuff to add too. So I know we're totally celebrating the Space Force and it's so exciting. It's coming up on its first birthday and that's great. But if any of you are thinking about joining any branch of the military, I think that's wonderful. You know, there are amazing STEM career fields and non-STEM career fields in every service. And it's just a wide variety of opportunities for you. So like I said, I come from a civil engineering background, so construction. So the Air Force and the Army and the Navy, we all need construction. And that's pretty, hang on one sec. Sorry, someone was coming to see me. But that's super exciting. Like there's lots of different opportunities. So you could be a military police officer or work in the medical career field. It's not just space, but if you are interested in space, the Space Force, I think, is where you want to be for those careers. Thanks.
Yeah, I think and Sierra Matthews, of course, is one of the best videographers and I'm going to brag on him. He's one of the best videographers in all of Space Force. And but he's still an airman. He's still in the Air Force. And certainly, you know, this installation is designed to support the space mission that's done here on the installation. But certainly, space supports everything, as Lieutenant Jordan mentioned. You know, so space is part of our national effort. It's global, actually. I mean, when you think about it, everything we do in Space Force supports the entire economic way of life globally. So, and certainly you can have so being a part of that is absolutely very special. We fly a lot of different satellites. And I will say one thing we didn't mention though is our cyber folks. We also have cyber folks that actually defend our weapon systems and defend our networks for any cyber attacks. So those members are also very important in the Space Force. So certainly and once the next step, we'll see what else we need to bring in to the Space Force, but from a space operator to an intelligence officer to a cyber operator, you know, these are all the critical career fields and critical skill sets that we need in the Space Force.
So we have a question from Kyle in 8th grade. He's wondering, what role do you serve in the planned trips to Mars?
That's probably the support will probably come from our launch bases. So we have 2 bases that are designed to support all space lift. All launches going to the International Space Station, any launch that's going to the moon or even to Mars. So we have 2 bases. The first base is out in Spaceport, is out at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. And we also, the main one, which people are very familiar with, of course, is Cape Canaveral Air Force, or now Space Force Station. In fact, the vice president came down there on 8th of December and renamed and redesignated that base from an Air Force station to a Space Force station. So Cape Canaveral and Patrick Air Force Base, now Patrick Space Force Base, is responsible for partnering with NASA and SpaceX and many of our other commercial partners to launch out of our range in Florida. So that's usually where we will provide probably the most support, is when it comes to actually launching to get the capsules on its way off to over to Mars. And in the recovery, one thing that a lot of folks don't know is that the Space Force, well, it's actually in the Air Force, but the unit is actually down at Patrick. We are responsible for the rescue of astronauts. So if the astronauts get into danger, either if they're returning back from the ISS or while the rocket is on the pad, the Air Force has a special operations unit that's actually, but they work for the Space Force down at Patrick, but they are responsible for the recovery and returning those astronauts safely back or get them out of harm's way. So that's, again, part of the partnership that we do with NASA and our commercial partners, is making sure that we can launch safely, launch their rockets safely, and also protect our astronauts while they're on the pad or if they're returning from the ISS.
That is so cool. So we have one last question that I'd like everyone to be able to answer. We have a little bit more of a philosophical life question from Isla in 8th grade. And she was wondering, has Space Force, your work with Space Force, changed your thoughts and belief about life, or kind of your outlook, or has that changed you in any way?
So I think maybe not so much Space Force, but space in general is just changed my life in general. The idea that it's just endlessly vast and large is super fascinating to me. And Space Force, being here, doing my job, typing the random things into the computer and making something so far away change what it's doing. It's just really awesome to have that kind of impact at such a large distance. Really puts into perspective how small we are on our little planet and how much that matters. So little things like climate change and just taking care of like our little piece of home, those things seem more apparent when we're looking at it from such a big perspective, because it's really not, it's huge for one little person, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really not a lot of it's just a small little home. But it's just really, really cool. And it's something that fascinates me to an extreme degree, even just getting to look at like the night sky sometimes, just seeing like how large it is and how far you can see with just the naked eye. I don't know, it's cool. I'm gonna nerd out, so maybe someone else can take over.
That's a good answer, Jordan.
Let me have C. Aaron Matthews chime in, because certainly this is his first base here, and certainly I would like to get his perspective on how it's been supporting the Space Force.
So it's definitely showed like a whole different realm of the military. The military itself is completely eye-opening experience-wise, and then showing that the Space Force and its capabilities is really, it's kind of showed the new realms that we can go to, and I don't know, I find it breathtaking, and it's definitely humbling.
Lieutenant McCrae, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, yes, sir. I was just thinking about that. So I don't want to get like too philosophical, but when I start thinking about our advancements into space and just our advancements on this earth in general, it kind of like takes me as an out of body experience if you think about it. Like we as human beings are so like mentally complex in our mind that we're able to do all this math and engineering in order to put man-made objects from the earth up into space, just like an asteroid or something. And when you start thinking about that and you start thinking about life in general, you really appreciate how intelligent human beings as a race are. Like our capabilities are really impressive. And it's all just sheer, determination for us to, learn these things and invent new things and accomplish all these new things. And it's just really impressive. And it really makes me like stop and think for a while, like about life in general and exploring the universe. And we're just on a rock floating in this space, and here we are creating amazing art and technological advancements here. So that's what it makes me think about life. And yeah, the Space Force and space in general has definitely opened my eyes.
Awesome, thank you. And Lieutenant Hart?
I have just been listening to this and realizing I'm going to have a hard time articulating it, I think. But the three ahead of me said it exquisitely. To sit in your day-to-day job and maybe hear things about the advancements that your institution is doing on a galactic scale is so humbling, and it makes you feel so small, and it makes you feel like the opportunities are endless. And you literally, from the troposphere on, there is open opportunity. And to me, that is amazing and just so mind-opening. But what kind of brings me back to it, that Lieutenant McCrae reminded me of, was I look around, right? I pull myself back down from space and what I'm doing in space at that very moment. And I look around and I see all of the people on our team, and there are so many different kinds of people, different shapes, sizes, colors, ethnicities, religions, thought processes, like values, just so many different people. And it took every single one of them to make that process work. And to me, that is the most beautiful thing about serving in the Space Force. And it has made me realize what a privilege it is to lead such an amazing group of people, and how inspired I feel to motivate other people to join that team. Because realistically, we're all tiny little drops in a bucket, but it takes all of those drops in a bucket to make an ocean, right? And some days you feel like a drop and some days you feel like an ocean. And that is my favorite thing about working with outer space and working with the people who have made this enterprise what it is.
Thank you all for sharing. That was really awesome. So students, Aditya, Chloe, everyone, could you please turn on your cameras just really quickly? Students, we just wanted you to be able to say goodbye and thank you before we hang up and you go to your next class.
Thanks for answering your questions. Bye.
Thank you so much. It was
Have a good day.
awesome honor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you in the Space Force.
Thank you.